Hi, I'm Lisa Spector. Thank you so much for joining us. So for those of you who have been on with me, thanks for posting where you're listening from. I started this series at the end of March when we started sheltering in place shortly after we started sheltering in place in California. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area. And for those of you who've been with me, know that I'm not at my piano. I'm still having we're changing internet plans there, and I'll be back there next week. So I'm at my lovely, gorgeous, renovated farmhouse belonging to my dear friend Gail. So thank you for hosting us. And there's actually a live audience. They're outdoors. They're high, and Gail will take some pictures of them. So it's a beautiful sunny day. They're outdoors in the driveway, about to listen to this performance while you're all listening at home. So thank you again for joining us. And for those of you who were here last week, that was also unusual. I played a concert on July 4th for dogs called Doggone Calm During Fireworks. And tonight is very different because rather than it being a performance, it's a little more like an educational opportunity where I'll be demonstrating from the piano. And I see my mom, Trudy Spector, is listening from Syracuse, New York. If everyone could give a shout out to my mom, Trudy Spector. She's in a senior residence in Syracuse, and I just love it that at her age, her upper 80s, she's able to get on technology and figure this out and be on the Facebook Live every week. So thanks for giving a shout out to her. This is a class that I've taught. I'm about to prepare to do online as an online course. And it's a class that I have taught. I've traveled with, and I've taught in retreat centers, Canyon Ranch, and other various places. And it's called Demystifying Classical Music. I give credit to my friend Elizabeth McKenna, who might also be on tonight. So Elizabeth gave me this idea about 2 years ago. She came to one of my concerts, and she said, Lisa, you talk about all these things about to listen for in the music, and most people go to a classical concert and they don't know what to do. They don't know when to applaud. They don't know what composers they like. They don't understand the different movements. When is it a new piece? When it isn't? And so I decided to break it down, which aligns with my mission. My mission has always been to simplify classical music, to make it approachable and accessible to all. Before I continue, I've made this mistake about 3 weeks ago. If someone could tell me, it'd be so helpful. Facebook is a mirror image. I set it not to be. I am raising my left hand. If someone could post in the comments, are you seeing my left hand? That would be so helpful. So I see a heart. Hopefully it applies to that. If someone could just write left or right. So I'm going to take a look, and Linda's here with the dogs, with Jojo and Zesty, who were snoozing during fireworks last week. And so if someone could post, there's a little bit of a delay here. And because when I go to play pieces for left hand only, I want to make sure it doesn't look like it's my right hand only. It's left. Okay, fantastic. Tracy, thank you so much. So I will now continue. So demystifying classical music aligns with my mission to simplify classical music, to make it approachable, to make it understandable. And this is, when I studied this at Juilliard, these were each one of the 4 periods of classical music was broken down into a whole semester. Normally when I've taught this, it used to be 2 hours a week for a month, back in the old days when things were longer. Then it went to a 1 hour session when I was traveling, not giving examples at the piano. So this is the cliff notes of the cliff notes. And I'm going to teach you a lot, but the important thing for me is that you start to really enjoy classical music in a broader way than you ever have. So my goal is to get you to really open up your ears, which then open up your heart so that you hear things well. So one other thing before I continue, if someone could just give me a heart or a thumbs up of my sound. How's my sound so far with my talking? You can hear me okay, so that's always good to know as well. And if you're just joining us, hi Michael, if you're just joining us, tell us where you're listening from. That would be so helpful to know. And trusting sound is good. So I will look for that comment on sounds or floating emoji. Okay, fantastic. Sound is good with my Shure mic here. So simple things. So when we used to go to concert halls, which someday we'll be going to concert halls again, one of the biggest things that people always ask is, I don't know when to applaud. I don't know when it's over. I don't know, pieces are broken down into movements. I don't know when it's over. If my advice is, if you don't know, don't clap until everyone else does. Except for Facebook Live. You're allowed to, our silent applause are through hearts and emojis, and you're allowed to do that anytime during the concert. So a couple other little things. What is the difference between a concerto, a symphony, and a sonata? A concerto is a piece for solo instrument. In my case, it would be piano, solo instrument plus orchestra. It could be a violin plus orchestra. Not the violin section that's in the orchestra, but the standing violinist like Joshua Bell that comes out and plays the Beethoven Violin Concerto with San Francisco Symphony. In my case, with the piano, it would be they raise the piano from the lower area and raise it, and it's in front of the conductor, in front of the whole orchestra. So it's a piece for solo. I'm going to give you some examples tonight of solo instrument plus orchestra. A symphony is a whole symphony. It could be a 40-piece string symphony written by Mozart that didn't require a big orchestration, or it could be a Berlioz Symphony Fantastique for a 120-piece orchestra. And a sonata I'm going to be talking about tonight. So these are just some of the questions I've been asked in the past. And I'm going to introduce you to a few composers and certainly a few of my composers. And I'm going to start with a composer that I'm not going to tell you what it is, because I'm going to do a portion of a piece, and I want you to just listen, and I want you to tell me, and also in your comments, if you could post, what emotions do you feel while you're listening? You're welcome to write that down while you're listening, and you're also welcome to write that down after you've listened to. I'm going to do just the first half section of this piece. So Chico the dog got up, and he seemed to like that. First, he's a senior guy. It's the first time I've seen him get up. So any emotions that you have coming out of that, of listening to that. And I'm going to scroll through a little bit of the comments here. And looking forward to hearing what you say. There's no right answer. There is no wrong answer. There's no consistent answer. You might have one answer today when you're hearing this. You might go back and listen to this tomorrow and have a completely different answer of the emotions that it inspired in you. So I will tell you that that was a piece by Domenico Scarlatti. That was an introduction to the Baroque period. And the Baroque period is, I wrote in the description the dates. I call this demystifying classical music. For musicians, this is not classical, this is Baroque. There is a period of music defining certain years, it defines classical music. Classical music has become kind of like the tissue of Kleenex, and it's an overall arching theme. But this is really, I will get to classical next, but in Baroque period, which mostly consists of the famous composers who I just played, Domenico Scarlatti, Vivaldi, Johann Sebastian Bach, and Handel, if you all know Handel Messiah. So the Baroque period went from 1600 to about 1750. It was the first period of music that we know of where music was written for particular instruments. So before that, you'd have a melody written, and it could be sung by a vocalist, it could be played by a flutist, it could be played by a harpsichordist, it could be played for a variety of instruments. But Baroque music really defined music written for particular instruments. It's hard to even imagine that right now. It was really used mostly in churches. So it was sacred music, and Johann Sebastian Bach also had many sons that were composers, C.P.E. Bach and many other famous composers that wrote later on. They were obviously younger, but in Bach's time, probably the most famous, not only the Baroque period, but maybe one of the famous composers of all time, he was writing for the church. So I see some comments saying happy. Great. I'm glad it made you happy. I wanted to start with something happy. We could all use that right now. And also part of the definition of Baroque is it's ornamented, it's decorated, there's a lot of elegance to it. So all those trills are very much part of the Baroque period. You'll hear everything I'm going to play tonight that's Baroque has trills and ornaments and turns, long trills and short turns, and I have a whole cheat sheet I give to my students of how to define each trill. So that's very much a part of the ornate, very formal. You can almost put a metronome to it. It's very stately, it's very solid, and there's real strong tempo. So going into Bach, which was so, I can't ignore him. So he wrote 48 preludes and fugues that are part of the well-tempered clavier. And if you're just joining in, when I'm playing, I'm inviting you to, one, tell me where you're listening from, and also when I'm playing to add in what you're feeling, what emotions are you feeling when you hear this music, because that's really the most important part of all of it. So in the Bach well-tempered clavier, he wrote 48 preludes and fugues. And each one, there are 12 steps in music, 12 keys in a scale. So C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, and so forth. And each one has a major and a minor. So he wrote the number 1 is in C major, the famous C major. Number 2 is in C minor. Number 3 goes up the scales in C sharp major. Number 4 is in C sharp minor. Number 5 from book 1, what I'm doing, is in D major. So a prelude is simply a piece before another piece, and in this case, before a fugue. So I'm going to play the D major book 1 of Johann Sebastian Bach of the Preludes, and then I'll talk about what happens in a fugue, which is very different. It's counterpoint. So that was the prelude from the prelude and fugue, and I'll get to the fugue in a second. And I was talking earlier about you can almost put a metronome. It's very formulaic. It's very solid in tempo. Until the end of this piece, it was a little bit of a cadenza. Thank you for the hearts. I always love that for applause. A little bit like a cadenza where it gets free and improvisatory, and that also was a part of the Baroque period. So it's a little more free, and then it gets very solid in tempo again. The other thing you heard in the Scarlatti as well as in the Bach is a lot of terrace dynamics, where I'm playing sections that I'm not gradually increasing. I'm not doing a crescendo or decrescendo. I'm not gradually changing from soft to loud. I'm suddenly changing from loud to soft or soft to loud. It's called terrace dynamics. So an example of that is where I went... It's a sudden change. The reason why it's very stylistic of this period is because Bach didn't write for this piano. This piano wasn't invented until much later, till 1859. So he wrote this, he lived from 1685 to 1750. So this piano wasn't around. He wrote for clavichord and for harpsichord, where you couldn't make gradations in dynamics. And the clavichord, the strings are struck by tangents, and the harpsichord, they're plucked by quills, so you can't do that crescendo. So a whole bunch of things open up for pianists later on, and I'll get to that a little bit later. The original piano that was created around 1700 was called a pianoforte, because it was the first keyboard instrument that could play piano, which means soft, and it could play forte, which means loud. We've just shortened the term, and now it's called piano. And so going into a fugue, and this is where Bach is so famous for his counterpoint. When I have students studying fugues, studying counterpoint, it's like a brain twist, even for me, for learning them. So it's like a brain twist. There's no more learn right hand and then left hand, and then right hand has the melody, left hand has the accompaniment, and put it together. That doesn't exist anymore. It's all about subjects and voices coming in. And when I'm going to show you in my music, I'm reading it from my iPad, but I highlight the subject. So what happens, I don't know if you can see this, is... this subject comes in. I'm going to give you a close-up. I don't know if you can see the highlights, but the whole score is highlighted. So what happens is the subject first starts on the key itself in D major. That's D major. Then it's going to come in again as the up a fifth. And up a fifth in music terms is the dominant. So when you have D, and if I play D major scale, and I go to the fifth degree, D, E, F sharp, G, A. A is the fifth degree, and its dominant is so important in any key. So that first subject, I'm going to play it by itself in the tonic, the D, the one key. Now it comes in the dominant, and it's on the A in the tenor voice. And then there's an episode that leads you to the next subject, which is up an octave from there, and it goes. Now we have a 4-voice fugue, because it's going to enter one more time on the dominant, on the A, an octave higher, and the soprano. And that leads to a little codetta that adds in all those voices. So something magical happens when you turn 50. And for me, personally, what happened is I was doing, this relates to this in a second. I was doing a concert, and I decided to rework some really challenging music I had done when I was a student at Juilliard, a whole set of 12 Chopin etudes, because I wanted to see if I could do it. And I could do it, and it went fine. But in that moment, I realized just because I can do something doesn't mean I have to. Once you turn 50, I think you kind of give yourself a pass. I don't play I decided when I turned 50, I don't play fugues in public anymore. I play them all the time for myself because they're great study material and they're great brain twisting material and they're great musical challenge, but they're complex and they're hard to memorize and I don't play them in public. So I'm only doing a little section of this. If you give me a thumbs up if you are over 50 and you can relate, or if you're under 50 and you can relate to that philosophy of you don't have to do everything you used to be able to do. So good. I'm glad I'm not alone here. So I'm going to do a little bit of this and just listen for the subject when it comes in on the D, and then also when it comes on in the A on the dominant. And there's going to be some little episodes and codettas between those subjects. And in this case, we have, this isn't always the case, but we have the A subject and then the B subject, on the tonic, and then it comes in on the dominant here. Sometimes in Bach, they actually overlap each other. In this case, it doesn't. But I picked one that's pretty easy to hear. One more time. I'm just going to stop there, but I'm going to show you there's a sequence which happens all the time in Baroque period. So that upper voice, then it comes in down a step. And then you're going to hear like the beginning. So now the subject starts to get more condensed. I'm over 50. I'm not going to finish that, but you can stream it, listen to a recording of it. It's the fifth from Fugue, the D major, from the book 1 of the Well-Timbred Clavier of Bach. So now going on to what really is classical period. Thank you so much for the hearts. What really is classical music, as trained musicians know, this is what we call classical music. Classical sonata form was really created by Mozart and Haydn. They developed a form that did not exist. When I played that opening Scarlatti sonata, that was not typical sonata form of what developed later. Again, thank you so much for the hearts. I just love it. And the most famous composers from this classic period, from about 1715 to 1825, were Haydn and Mozart in early classic, and then Beethoven as well. And I am going to introduce sonata form, and Beethoven's kind of in his own category, so we'll talk about him last, because we're going to talk about sonata form as Haydn and Mozart invented it. So this is a little example of a Haydn D major sonata, and I will tell you, this is like so much the Cliff Notes. Sonata form is so important to understanding classical music because it not only exists in sonatas, it exists in everything: concerti, symphonies, chamber music, piano trios, string quartets. So much of that is in sonata form, and it really helps to understand that. So I actually have a whole first movement sonata form unlisted video that's free for you when you sign up for my mailing list at lisaspector.com, and particularly if you check a category of interest called Demystifying Classical Music, you'll get that right away in your inbox, and you can listen to that anytime. That goes into an explanation with me using a full example of a full first movement of a Beethoven sonata. I'm going to give you the complete Cliff Notes to that tonight, introducing a Haydn sonata that the form is exposition, the composer introduces, so exposes the first two themes. And in this case, Haydn was very humorous in his writing very often. So I won't go into an explanation now, it'll take too long, but two symphonies that he wrote that had a lot of humor to them are the Farewell Symphony and the Surprise Symphony. And the Surprise Symphony was written, so we are talking about a classic period where music was taken out of the church, and now it's for the aristocratic society. It's played in estates and for kings and queens, and as after dinner entertainment. There was no TV, there was no internet, there was no Facebook Live, imagine that. So there was real live music that was entertainment. So Haydn was the conductor and composer of the Esterházy Orchestra and the Esterházy Estate, and he got so tired of the aristocrats falling asleep after their big meal during the orchestral concert that he wrote the Surprise Symphony with a very, very slow, very calculated, very steady beat, slow movement that was very, very soft. And it just goes on and on. It's very soft. And then in the least expected part is a crashing chord to wake everyone up. That's how he used his music. So I think you'll hear some of that humor here. So the first theme in this starts like this. And then it goes on and elaborates from that. The second theme is the B theme. Again, we're in the exposition exposing those two themes. And I'm just going to do a little bit of it now. Usually the performer will take a repeat on the exposition. I'm not going to. I'm just going to do the exposition once, and I'm going to go into a little bit of the next section, which is the development. In the development, the composer takes both of those themes, the A theme and the B theme, and he takes them and shortens them, puts them on top of each other. It's the most harmonic, quick changes. It's usually the most challenging part for the performer technically. And then it builds up in intensity and then leads back to the first theme, what he calls, in this case it was only calls the recapitulation, which we shortened it to call the recap. So I'm not going to get that far. I'm going to do the exposition and a little bit of the development of the Haydn D major. And I didn't put the program notes, but I will add them afterwards. I just don't know how much I'm going to get to this in this hour. Thank you. And again, please write down your emotions you're feeling while you listen. I hadn't planned on playing that far. That was well into the development, and until he comes back to the A theme. And it's very fun, it's very lively, it's so typical Haydn. So slow movements art can be anything. You know, Beethoven, Haydn, and Mozart wrote these gorgeous long slow movements. They're so beautiful. This particular sonata of Haydn is a really short slow movement, and normally there's repeats, and I'm not going to take them, but it's just really pretty much just A-B form. It's very simple, but elegant and gorgeous. You'll hear in this music, like the Baroque period, it's very structured, very formal, very steady in tempo. That will all change as we get into the Romantic period. But listen kind of just for like the simpleness of this. This is like just, an elegant lace gown with elegant silk gown with a lace handkerchief. It's elegance at its finest. There's a lot of space in there. There's a lot of breath. There's a lot of pausing in there, which I'm going to talk about more when we get to Beethoven next. I'm going to do just a tiny bit, like 3 lines of the last movement of the same sonata, the Haydn. I played this whole movement maybe 2 months ago. I did a program called Sonatas, and this was one of the ones I did at the last movement of. And it's just fun, it's lively, it's just, so last movement form is often Rondo, and a Rondo, bear with me, it's a little long, but it's easy to understand when you see it. So I'll write it in the notes later. It's A, B, A, C, A, B, A. So in other words, you have an A section and then a B section. A comes back ornamented, embellished. A, B, A, C is new. A comes back again, more ornamented. B comes back embellished. A comes back more embellished, and then a coda, a tail ending. So I'm just going to do a couple lines from the A section of the Haydn. That's the A section. Any comments and any mood you felt while you were listening to that? Any emotions that came up for you? For me, it's fun, it's lively. When I took the repeat, I don't know if you heard this, but you can go back later and listen. When I took the repeat, I embellished it. I added more ornaments. And Elaine, I look forward to reading your comment later, and embellished it more, and that was very typical of that period. So I am going into Beethoven. So Beethoven lived a much longer life than Mozart, who had a short life. So Beethoven is almost like three composers. We have early period Beethoven, which mostly is very classical in style, which I've been talking about. We have middle period Beethoven, which everything gets longer and bigger, and he starts to break from form. It's one of the things that made him so great. That's when he started losing his hearing. And then we have later period Beethoven. So when I say an opus number, it's just the German word for work. It's a chronological listing of composers' works. And Beethoven early period is about Opus 1, which was a piano trio, to about Opus 49, which is a piano sonata, is about Opus 51, piano sonata, and then the 53, the Waldstein, and the Appassionata, Opus 57. That just gives you, again, Opus is just a chronological listing of the composer's works. So from about Opus 50 up to Opus 100 is his middle period, and then his late period is started with the late Beethoven sonatas, 101. He wrote about 5 of them, 101, 106, 109, 110, and 111 is his last piano sonata, but then he was writing the Gross Fugue for string quartet, which he started to break, he really got into breaking form and brought classic music into the Romantic period with his late period. So if you think of the he wrote 9 symphonies, and the 9th symphony, nowadays it's normal, but those days it wasn't. He had the largest orchestra. He wrote it for the largest member of orchestras. He had a full chorus on stage. He had 4 voice soloists for the famous Ode to Joy. That had never been done. He was always breaking form. He was not traditional at all. If you think of the Moonlight Sonata, I don't even remember right now, but that is a first movement. So that is not sonata form at all. One of the things that made him so great is he broke form. He was constantly breaking form. So, and then it introduced us to so much. I am going to play a little bit of the last movement of an early Beethoven sonata. So this is Opus 14, number 2. And I'm just going to play this to show you some things that Beethoven was very famous for. When I think of Beethoven, what identifies him, 2 things that identify him more than anything else in my mind is his rests, his use of pauses, his use of silence in the music was so profound. If you think of something as simple as the 5th Symphony, which is middle period, that is 4 notes. They're all minor thirds. There's nothing magical about those notes. It's the rest. So listen to the pause between the notes. When you have whole orchestra and that whole orchestra gets silent at the same time, it causes this tension. Beethoven was all about tension. Another way he did that was he was constantly throwing in surprise dynamics. So he would have a loud section and have this huge crescendo that you would think would lead it to this louder section, and all of a sudden he would drop all the dynamics and would go to pianissimo, really soft section. He was constantly doing that. He was constantly throwing in surprises with rest and with pauses. And just with this little bit of the G major, I think you'll get a sense of that. Also, sforzandos. If I look at my Beethoven score, there's sforzandos, which is a really, really loud accent that comes out of nowhere. It happens all the time. And rhythmically, this is all like on the offbeat. This is all like it's like jumping rope when you're a kid and 2 people are holding the rope, and then you jump in the middle and you never quite know when that's kind of like Beethoven right now. I'm going to stop there in that, but that was also another typical thing is contrast. Like all this kind of jolting, surprising, and then this lyrical section. And so forth. So, man, is this going by fast? Okay, so we are going on to the Romantic. So if you looked at and again, there's going to be more and more possibly emotions coming up depending on your preferred style. And so feel free to write that in the comments of what emotions you're experiencing while you listen to this. The Romantic. So this is my period. This is my favorite period. In the description I wrote, there's 3 or 4 famous composers in the Baroque, 3 in the Classic, and then there's hundreds, so many hundreds in the Romantic and then also in the 20th century. So this is just the tip of the iceberg. So everything is changing. Now concerts are being taken out of the church. I mean, sometimes in the church too, but it's not exclusively for the church. It's not exclusively for their staccato. It's in the home environment. Salons became very popular where that would be the entertainment for your neighbors at night. And then concert halls were starting to be built and got bigger and bigger. And our piano, as we know it, also got larger. Orchestras got larger. The piano didn't get larger. The piano sound got larger. Everything was designed, I forget exact year, but press was invented in the 1800s, and so reviews were happening, and so much more was made for the public now. So it was really a dynamic period in expansion. Also in expansion was tempo. So orchestras got larger and louder, and also tempos got more elaborate. So pieces got longer. Symphonies now went from 3 movements to often 4 movements to sometimes 5 movements. And there was less structure. There definitely were sonatas in this period. Chopin wrote very famous sonatas in sonata form, but added a lot of give and take to the tempo. Chopin is very famous for his rubato. It's called you take a rubber band and you put the tempo in it and you stretch it and then put it back and stretch it and put it back. That happened all the time in the Romantic period. So I am going to go through this is just the cliff notes again, just highlights from a few very famous concerti that you will recognize. So a concerti is plural for concerto. A concerto, like I mentioned at the beginning, is a piece for solo instrument plus orchestra, so in this case piano. And I'm going to pick out a few key themes. I'm going to try and do this at the top of my head without music, of music you might recognize that has lush, long lines. It's so romantic. To me, this just defines Romanticism. Starting with the first piano concerto I ever played when I was 16 is the Grieg Piano Concerto. Just a few highlights, the theme from it, which, by the way, starts with, again, this changed too. It started with a big timpani build up, and then the piano comes in with big introduction chords. I'll try and do that. See if my hand can reach the chords, and then leads into the beautiful lyrical theme. So that is normally that's played with a whole orchestra behind me. So that'd be, the lush strings and long lines, and it's so romantic and so gorgeous. Another very famous, probably the most famous concerto of all time, is the Tchaikovsky. So Tchaikovsky, Russian composer, wrote his first piano concerto. Keep in mind, currently probably the most famous, most played piano concerto ever, and it debuted to terrible critiques, to the audience throwing tomatoes at the performer, at the conductor, at the orchestra players, because they said it was too complex, it was too long, the orchestra was too big, it was too hard for the piano part. Now it's just like, if you're a pianist, you play Tchaikovsky, it's just kind of like breathing. So it's interesting to see what's happened. So for those of you who don't know me, haven't been here, my right hand is recovering from 4 surgeries, and these reaches are big for me. I'll do just a little bit of the opening octave theme of the Tchaikovsky. Actually, the orchestra has a melody, and the piano is just playing octaves, and then the piano comes in with this, and I'll just do a little bit of this because you'll guaranteed you'll recognize it. It's so fun to play. I might do a night, maybe I'll do a night of all concerti. Maybe give me a thumbs up or a heart if you want to hear themes from concerti or movements from concerti. And again, it's just would be a solo piano part, but I think I haven't pulled out the Greek in a long time. I think my hand could probably reach those chords. And sections of the Chopin E minor, probably my favorite piece from all time, and I'll do a little bit of this. So Chopin, I was talking about, so now we're also broadening our region. Before we were more in Austria and in Germany and a little bit of Italy with Baroque. Now we're all over the map. We're talking about Russian composers and German composers and Norwegian composers all over Europe, and so there's geographically composers expanded as well. And this is the second theme from the Chopin E minor, his first, he wrote it second, but it's called the First Piano Concerto. Just to give you an idea of the liberty that happened in the Romantic period. So the broadening of tempos, you cannot put a metronome to this. This is just tons of rubato, tons of give and take in tempo. So this is such a gorgeous theme. The second theme from the first piano concerto, the second time it comes. And I have discovered that my hand can reach quite a bit of that first movement. So that might be a piece I bring out and play. It's my favorite. Thank you. Thanks for the hearts. So, well, I know we're running over, but this is a free event, so I'm just going to add in a few things. So I call this left hand lemonade because I have learned to turn lemons into lemonade by playing music for left hand only as my right hand is recovering. So I want to do a short section of a Chopin piece that Chopin wrote 24 etudes, studies, and originally Chopin wrote this, and then Godowsky, another late Romantic composer from Poland, rearranged this for left hand only. So I'll do a little bit of this starting with my left hand, and maybe I'll get to some of how Chopin wrote it with two hands before we go into 20th century. Thank you. I forgot. You have people out in the driveway. They could be clapping. Thank you. I finally played a piece in its entirety, too. Wasn't planning on that. But you know what? We're going over, so you're getting your money's worth. So 20th century is such a broad... There's no word... There hasn't yet. No one's created a term for this because there's so many different periods of the 20th century. So there's what started 20th century music is really Impressionism, the music of Debussy and then Ravel. And I would love to do a whole class on Debussy, and I will, but really shortened. So Debussy failed all of his theory classes at the Paris Conservatory because he did not like structure and he did not like to write music in particular keys. He did not use, very rarely used the scales as we know them. He used whole tone scales, added a lot of pedal for piano with that. that created a lot of color. He often wrote his music to describe a certain particular painting. He often used water scenes. And so if we think of Reflets dans l'eau, reflections in the water, the middle section of that, I'm going to attempt here, and just to give you an idea of how he used his sound to create lots of color. By request, I am working on a whole night of French music that's coming up this month. And so then we go into, there's 12-tone music of Berg and Webern. It's a whole nother subject I won't even go into. Then we get into the music of Gershwin. I played Rhapsody in Blue 2 weeks ago. It's on my Left Hand Lemonade page at lisaspector.com, and as well as on Facebook. And music, it just goes on and on, of Bartok and Prokofiev. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of composers. But one of the things that happen in general with music, again, everything is broadened. Everything is, rules are changing. So a minor second on piano is the most dissonant sound you can get. Chopin used those all the time, one note after another, minor, major second. Major second is also quite dissonant, to create beauty in this. With one note after another. Composers in the 20th century put them on top of each other to create excitement and rhythm and dissonance that made it vibrant. So this is such a tiny example, but a little bit of Villalobos's, a South American composer, piece called Policinello from the Baby's Family. So this is all minor seconds. That's what makes it so rhythmic and so exciting. And so forth. Bartok used rhythms for excitement. Prokofiev did it all the time, where meters, you'd have 4 beats in a measure, the next measure would have 3 beats, the next measure would be 5 beats, the next measure would have 7 beats, to create a lot of tension, a lot of excitement. And so it's just so broad. And then I also mentioned I'd be playing music from the Baroque period all the way to 2020, which I'm about to do. And so is Zach Goluboff Davis, I know he had RSVP, was coming, and I forgot to check in with him. Is he on? So Zach, he's on. Is he here? So Zach, if you are on, I think, chime in. So Zach, you are my favorite composer of the 21st century. And I'm so honored. He's written 3 pieces for me, 3 nocturnes. And this one I played last week in my Doggone Calm concert, Doggone Calm during Fireworks concert. And I'm going to close with this because it's such a beautiful, it's just so gorgeous. And it's such a beautiful way to end the program. And so I will go into this. Please write your emotions while you're feeling this. There may be many. And I'm so looking forward to hearing what you're experiencing as you listen to this. Thank you. And thank you to Zach for writing that for dogs, to calm dogs, but I think it's pretty calming for people. What do you think? And that's also in the middle of my doggone concert that's now had 1,500 views currently on Facebook from last week. So that's also my page at Lisa Spector Pianist, where we are now. And love to have you join my mailing list. Again, I have a free video for you. It's unlisted, it's private, it's a fuller introduction to demystifying classical music. I am going to put this in an online course, and if you're interested in that, definitely let me know in the comments, because I'm working on that very soon, and I want to get your input as to what you want to, the direction that you'd like that to go. So I'd love to get that input. I will be back next week on my piano. Not sure, it's either going to be a program of all Baroque or all French. I'm learning some new music for left and only for French. It kind of depends on the speed at which I learn. So again, I'm honored that you're here, and also accepting donations. I left a PayPal link in the program description. This is a free service, but if you feel inclined and are able, I'm so appreciative of any donations that come in. Thank you. And thank you to my friend Gail for hosting night. The audience is out in the driveway here. I think Gail did you post a picture of them?
I can't post pictures.
It won't let you. Okay, I'll post a picture a little later. We got an audience out there. It's been fun, and we have Chico here, the dog, listening. I don't know how much hearing he has, but he seems to have settled. So he perked up. Okay, good. Fantastic. So thank you again, and we'll see you next week. And please share this if you enjoy this and you know anyone else that would benefit from learning about classical music and wants classical music demystified. I so appreciate it if you share it. You can start a watch party at any time during the week, and then they can join you when you watch it again. Thank you so much. Have a nice night and a safe week.